It's now 3 minutes after 7 local time. This is Morning Express, and it's time for us to get into the newsroom. I'll introduce the panel that we have here this morning. To my extreme left, we've got a journalist, and that is Eric Latif. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. We have William Okech, who's a policy analyst. He was with us in the newspaper review and still staying with us on Newsroom. Thank you for staying on. We have Crispus Yankem, who's a communications expert. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Michael.
Last but not least, we have David Ohito, who's a digital editor with us here in the Standard Group. Karibu sana, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. And I know I'll probably get some stick regarding gender balance, but I did try to get some ladies on the panel, but for one reason or the other, they were not available. So it is not intentional or by design that it is a testosterone-filled panel right now. But anyway, that aside, let's start off, first of all, with a shocker that took place last Wednesday, Thursday. And this, of course, was the winning of the President-elect Donald Trump. And maybe let's start off with the polls, because all along, the pollsters had given us an indication that Trump was not going to be the president-elect. It was generally expected that Hillary Clinton was going to take it, but today, it's a different story altogether. So let me start with you, Eric, in terms of what lesson do we learn from there, and are polls a way to go, especially because, like here in Kenya, we normally have a lot of emotion brought about by polls. But looking at America now, that emotion definitely, maybe it's a conversation that we need to have.
It's indeed a conversation that needs to happen on how polls are conducted and the credibility of the polls. In Kenya, because it's still, a new thing for political polls to be conducted. I mean, there's always that issue of how much depth our polls have. But in an established system like the United States or in the UK, where we also saw the Brexit referendum,
right,
it's the same kind of thing that happened. It raises those questions of are people becoming less honest when they are responding to pollsters? Are they giving the actual information, or are they saying, I'm going to vote this way because they're seeing that's how it's going to be? On the other hand, have polls been manipulated to suit certain agenda? Drive
a certain narrative.
Yes.
Okay. David Ohito, your thoughts on the polls and whether it's something that we can really depend on or rely on? We seem to.
Very interesting question and observation. I've read dozens of analysis about the polls. And the U.S. elections were monitored by a total of 67 pollsters. Out of 67 pollsters, only 4. And out of the 4, 3 had united with the Los Angeles Times. That is the only poll that gave Trump a chance over the last 4 months. The rest of the 63 said Clinton was ahead by +3, +5, +4, not even +2. The average was +3. So if you are a journalist and you are looking at the stats from pollsters, definitely you know the tangent your story would take. But that brings in the question that it is not only in the American election that the pollsters were rubbished. Brexit the other day also showed how pollsters have got it wrong. So in the last 2 major global elections, the Brexit and the American elections, and my good friend, the counsel here will tell you, being on the verge of history, you cannot be on the verge of history by losing. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with the Standard headline. And I will defend, I was one of the people who really had an impact on that headline. And I still stand by what we published. Yes, we make mistakes. No profession ever all over the world does not make mistakes. But I believe we did not make mistakes. We relied on 64 out of 67 pollsters and their results.
Supposedly meant to be scientific, and by the fact that they're scientific, they kind of make us think that they're proven. But this, of course, is a lesson for us to draw.
Oh, yes. First, I think it's not yet time for us to throw opinion polls or flush it down the drain, because as it is, it's a scientific process. It involves estimation, which has plus or minus margin of errors. But then what really came out from this election is that there's some certain dynamics which were ignored, especially by the pollsters. The first one was the issues that had confronted Secretary Clinton, that is especially the email saga. And especially at the point when the FBI had reopened those investigations midway towards the tail end of the campaigns. That one had a huge impact. I think the pollsters did not factor that one in. And then secondly, also there's the issue of the silent majority. The voices of the silent majority had been completely ignored in that campaign. Because you find that whereas Mr. Donald Trump, the president-elect right now, had a solid message, and his core message was that I am coming in as an outsider, I'm an underdog, I'm coming in to fight the establishment, and he was specifically appealing to the white, conservative American voter, and more or less like stoking their fears, you know, with the issue of immigration, with the issue of race, and such like. So I think those polls in itself, you said there was a, there was a plus or minus 3 margin of error. The pollsters failed to build onto that one in a very progressive step, because you find that especially this election was won on the battleground states, talk of Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio. That is where Clinton lost the elections, because the pollsters did not accurately take note of what the Americans were saying, what was confronting Clinton. But as it is not yet time. We have to learn from them as a media. We may learn from them, but it is not yet time to get rid of them.
All right. Finally, Chris Pasiankem, your take on polls.
Well, thanks, Mike. But I think it will be a great disservice, especially to the Standard, if I don't mention that, if actually I don't weigh in on the Amina Mohammed and Kenya's push for AU chairperson. Just a minute. I don't know.
Can you answer the question?
Let me finish, please. Eric, let me finish.
Every time.
The thing is, I've seen a lot of articles on Amina Mohammed and Kenya's entire push to take over the chairperson. But your story, but your story last night actually answered a lot of questions. Exactly what it means to the common person for Kenya to be pushing for AU Commission chairperson. But let me quickly come to your question on opinion pollsters. I remember early this year, was it somewhere in March or May, when we had a conversation on the US election. We were open to various factors, and we said we were actually in agreement that the US election was going to be too close to call. So it is not surprising to see Donald Trump being president-elect today as we sit here. A lot of factors actually might have contributed to that. And I've seen a lot of articles again talking about Bradley effect, talking about the spiral of silence, and talking about the entire campaign. But let me say this. Hillary Clinton lost the US election when Bernie Sanders was controversially denied the ticket of the Democratic Party. Why do I say so? You saw exactly Bernie Sanders was somehow the favorite, according to the news that time, the opinion polls that were projecting Bernie Sanders as the favorite candidate of Democratic Party. Number two, Hillary Clinton failed to live up to the aspirations of the average US citizenry. Hillary Clinton represented the past. Donald Trump was talking of the future. He actually spoke the language of the average American. The entire conversation on terrorism, the entire conversation of making America great again, the entire conversation of building a wall along the Mexican border, those were the issues that propelled Donald Trump to be elected as we speak today. And those are the issues that were definitely ignored by opinion pollsters. When Ohito talks of the Standard carrying the headline story, I think that was a risk when they spoke of on the verge of history in reference to Hillary Clinton. It actually depicted the situation that the average editor in the newsroom struggles with, especially when you're looking at critical stories of this nature.
Okay, David Ohito, is still your headline coming up. And I guess on the verge of history, really, if you think about it in terms of grammar, doesn't mean that history has happened. It's just on the verge. Yes. However, to the average reader, once they see on the verge of history, they almost conclude, especially with a big picture there of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I was even...
But I'm not saying that they got the story wrong. I'm simply saying that those are the realities that the average editor like Ohito sometimes grapples with when you're looking at a banner headline, especially when an election is too close to call, like
now,
the U.S.
Question here would be, David, if of course we may not know how that would have panned out, but had you known that Donald Trump was going to be president, the same headline would still apply, but a different picture. And that would be a totally different story.
You know, for every story you see published, you should see the other versions. Actually, we had the Trump headline ready, just in case, because the elections were very tight, very close to call. And you remember, no single media house called the election until the last 4 states. No, all over the world, no single media house, including Fox, called the election until the last 4 polling stations. What does that tell you?
It was close.
Too tight to make a decision. An editor must be decisive. You must stand by what you take to the streets. And when the time of going to press arrives, there's very little to do. You are like a medic, you're like a surgeon, where you think there are 2 chances. You save this life, cut it up, or let the patient die. That is what we did. But look at other global media houses. The Washington Post, the entire editorial board sat 3 hours after Trump had won, and they wrote an editorial signed by all editors. And they said, Donald Trump, let me quote, became the 45th president of the United States of America. Those were words we never hoped to write.
But you know, the other interesting bit, Michael, is the media, the entire media, not just in the country, but even in the US, the Fox and even CNN had condemned Donald Trump.
Sure.
And those were the things that Donald Trump was exploiting, because he needed to be controversial to capture the attention of the media. And the media failed to realize that this is somebody who's exploiting the inefficiencies of the media industry and
for his own benefit.
Yeah, for his own benefit.
Okay. All right.
You could even see the way they grappled with words. Fox News presenters were not even able to articulate the issues and come to the reality. But now, Michael, the chicken have come home to roost, and the world had better woken up to that reality.
Okay, and not just the US, but of course Brexit as well. Maybe coming to you, Eric, in terms of coverage, just the general coverage of the whole US election, I think looking at it, we were more or less updated literally on a minute-to-minute basis of what was going on.
Yes,
world over.
Yes, the whole world. You know, the U.S. election is important across the world, and we can say that the media across the world covered that election blow by blow, so to speak, and it was good. It was good that the issues were coming out. It was good that you know, both sides were getting fair share of coverage. Trump enjoyed, I think, in my opinion, Trump enjoyed a lot more coverage than Hillary. And he basically had written the script, and everybody was playing by his script without even realizing it. It was even, media was also actually even covering and saying he's not spending as much on advertising as the other side because he's getting free publicity. It was a very well executed tactic. But in terms of coverage and the issues coming out and the issues coming to the fore, yes. At some point, I started asking myself, however, you know, that whole issue of, you know, trying to compare a Trump presidency and taking us back to 1933 when Germans elected Adolf Hitler, I started wondering, is the media participating in a scaremongering of some sort? Yes. Is the media, you know, getting carried away by its own story and trying to portray that this is the wrong candidate, this is an apocalypse of some sorts happening? What the Washington Post did, and the editorial board sat and they wrote an opinion and said, this is something that we hoped never to. Well, they were expressing their opinion, and, you know, like we had said the last time, the media in these countries takes a stand, and they stand by their stand. But do they go overboard in taking their stand? The Guardian has dedicated a whole 2 weeks. Every day there has to be a strong feature that says Donald Trump is the worst thing that has ever happened to the world. You know? Is it going a bit overboard? Is the narrative too much?
Yeah, too
Are
much.
we scaremongering?
David, do you think that, or maybe William, I've not heard from you, in terms of the media maybe taking up a story and getting carried away and forgetting, having the lines blurred to a point where you have so much decided against a candidate to a point where now we are no longer objective?
Oh, yes. Just as my friend has said, Secretary Clinton, at the point that she secured the nomination, well, it appeared that she was an establishment candidate, the powers that be, being that she had had that history of being the senator, being First Lady Senator of New York. Even prior to that, Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, and there had been several scandals touching.
After, excuse me,
yes.
But coming back home now, Crispus, IEBC, we are currently getting new commissioners, but looking at credible institutions to run an election and how important that is, given that after they announced, and I think it was after, even, I mean, we had a panel in studio to look at it practically, who we were looking and trying to analyze the elections as they were going on. But at the point where the Clinton headquarters announced and said that, guys, go to sleep, we'll give you an announcement in the morning, that was almost conceding in a way. But coming back to credible institutions and the fact that when we have credible institutions in place, then it calms down the people regardless of whichever way the vote goes.
Absolutely so. And looking at the U.S. election, I think there are quite a number of positives that we need to draw from that election. One of them, you just mentioned that Hillary Clinton was quick to concede to actually place a phone call to Donald Trump, despite all the negatives that had been portrayed in the media between the two candidates. I think that is something that we can learn as Kenyans and appreciate the fact that even as we head into the elections, the candidates, particularly the presidential and those who are gunning for gubernatorial positions, must learn that when it is time to concede, you better do that, and very fast, to save the country. Number two, coming back home, you spoke of the IEBC and the entire recruitment process of the new commissions. I think, first of all, let me say that I'm a bit disappointed, because looking at the list that was published in print media yesterday, the number of applications, the number of particularly applications, those who have applied to be the chairperson of the new commission, I think I'm a bit disappointed, because there are only 2 or 3 names that stand out. One of them is Dr. Mutaha Kangu. The other one is David Malaquin and the Mzungu. But is it not even interesting to see that quite a lot of big names did not apply? It actually tells you one thing, that Kenyans are now worried. Kenyans are worried taking up particular jobs that of high voltage. For instance, IEBC and EACC. So it is not surprising to see that a number of people that we expected to apply haven't applied. Number 2, we must appreciate the fact that this process must be completed within no time. We are running late. If we are to have the elections next year in August on 8th, then this process must end by mid-December. Credit must be given to the selection panel, especially the panel that is being led by Bernadette Musundi. They have done a credible job. The question is whether they have the right candidates actually to take up those particular positions and assure the country. Number 2, I think particularly on the court side, and especially ODM, Ohito's party, I think it is no time to start being obstinate about this matter. This matter requires a lot of concerted effort. It requires national goodwill for us to be able to back this process and assure Kenyans that we can go to the polls and produce results that is acceptable to all.
I can see Eric nodding his head. Are you nodding in agreement or disapproval of what he has to say?
No, I'm just thinking, you know, in around March, April, around that time, I kept saying on this show that we are allowing politics to take over credible institutions that are supposed to be independent. And their independence is guaranteed by the Constitution. But then politicians come in and take up this independence and make a joke of it. And the same thing that happened when we started intimidating the IEBC. And that intimidation game went up to a point where we have paid a huge amount of money to get commissioners out of office because we want to bring new commissioners that we think are going to be credible, right? So when everybody else who thinks that they have credibility and they can stand by their credibility look at what has happened to the previous team, you feel like your name is going to be dragged and muddied in a process that has completely nothing to do with you or your failings or your failures. And I think that's what has happened. We have gotten to a point where politics has taken two very key institutions and just used them as toys. We have IEBC now, like Crispin is saying, that we know we do not have a high caliber of candidates who have applied. Those who have applied are good, but do we have many of them who have applied, many of them who have been shortlisted? Do we have a good pool to choose from? Same thing with the EACC. Why are good people not, why are people who have credibility, why are people who think that, you know, they have patriotism and the interest of Kenya at heart, why wouldn't they apply for a job like EACC? It's because
it's become too political.
Politician.
All right, David, do you agree that possibly independent, in quotes, institutions have become too political to a point where we cannot even attract the right people into those institutions? And reflecting it on our responsibility as the media, maybe that's something we should be highlighting rather than just following. These are the applicants, but maybe we should also be querying, why don't we have certain applicants in for these particular jobs?
Well, public offices have really become lynching positions in Kenyan public. And you've seen, I started asking this question when we know the good legal minds that would have expected to rise to the position of Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, when you saw them reserved. And good counsel here, William Cage, will tell you that there are so many things that put hurdles in the way of getting good candidates. One, there are people who have successfully done their practice or in good businesses or good positions elsewhere and do not want to be attacked by the political folk and be subjected to this kind of scrutiny and tug of wars in political factions. Two, if you ask lawyers why they don't apply for these jobs, is that most of them do not have these compliance certificates. And counsel here will agree with me.
What does it take to get one?
Yeah, they've not serviced their help loans.
Yes.
They have not complied with the tax requirements.
They have clients' money.
They have clients' money.
That disqualifies
yes,
them.
quite a big chunk. And it's a fact that we cannot run away from. So at the end of it, you have a very limited number of people who are really qualified with the good history and track record that you'd really want to fit in this position. However, if we have strong institutions, and which is why Kenya is very different from the American scenario, all these things Trump said, when you walk into the White House, there is a norm, there are ways in which it works. You cannot just walk in and say, tomorrow 30,000 Kenyans pack and go home. No, there are people who run the show there and tell you, Mr. President, I have seen 4 presidents before you. You cannot come and tell me this.
You can't dictate.
Yes. There are few positions where he has a hand to handpick whoever he likes. And if you read, there's been very measured relationship between the Trump president-elect and the Pentagon, for example. Because there are generals there who have seen wars, who have seen presidents. Just don't walk to them and say, today we're going to open fire on Syria. No, they cannot allow it to happen. So it's not like Kenya where you walk in and say, I don't like this general so pack and go home, and he goes home. Or I don't like this kind of public officer, you pack and go home. Or you are subjected to public lynching, and then you become a nobody overnight. Their institutions are very strong to the level that even if you have a weak president, there's no doubt that the CV of Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton is Trump's is 10% of Clinton's.
Hillary.
Yes. But that does not weaken the American presidency. It's a serious institution that enjoys a lot of respect. And you've seen how the media have changed overnight, saying all we need is a better America for all of us. It's all our country. And yeah, the editorials.
Right. And maybe 2 things, William, as you come in. One is the fact, do you agree with Ohito that we have a good number of legal minds, but their track record possibly does not qualify them to make it to office? And secondly, looking at the change of narrative even by the media in the US, as opposed to sometimes the way we polarize by continuing with a certain narrative. Oh, these ones have lost, so there was this stolen, there was that happening. But the media seems to have changed their in support, as it were, of Donald Trump. Okay, he's president-elect now. There's not much we can do about it. Let's now give him as much support as we can give.
Oh yes, on the first issue of the IBC shortlist, when you looked at the announcement, the qualifications specifically for the chair, it was very high. In the IEBC Act, the qualifications of chair is a person who is qualified to be a Supreme Court judge. That means you must have at least not less than 15 years legal experience, either as an advocate or either as a jurist. That is very high. Not so many advocates have that one. And then secondly also, Chapter 6 of the Constitution has come with several requirements. You need to not have any disciplinary issue at the Advocates Complaints Commission. That means you need not have to have squandered any client's money or having complaints. You need to have cleared your HELB loans. We know that many people are struggling with this issue of HELB loans. Then you need to be up to date with your tax compliance. Recently, we have seen that a very senior member of the legal profession and also Judicial Service Commission member is having issues with the KRA over some tax arrears. So only that issue can really make you even not qualify. Then there's also the issue of the CID, Certificate of Good Conduct. Yeah, you remember we've had a senior judge of the Court of Appeal who was not able to put in his application for CJ because of not having that certificate, a previous prosecution. He had been prosecuted earlier. So some of these issues shrunk the degree of possible candidates who could give in. One other issue, we saw that there are over 800 people who applied for the position of member, and I have to declare my interest, I was one of them. I wonder, the selection panel is going to have a very difficult position, shortlisting, because you are aware there's a case when JSC was shortlisting candidates for interviews. A person went to court and say that there was no criteria, open criteria that is transparent and accountable to show how we were. Yes. You remember the good judge gave out an order and say that where people are qualified, then they need to be interviewed, all of them, when they meet the minimum. Being that the time is very short, we need to have a new IBC commission probably by mid-December. If out of the 800, we say about 400 are qualified, that is an horrendous task. On the issue of the outcome of the American elections, there has been tradition over time that the moment a candidate wins that election, then he becomes president for all Americans. That is why, however passionate or however scathing the campaigns were, every president-elect, when he or she gives the victory speech, they mellow down.
I thought that's how it is supposed to be.
Oh yes.
When you take over an office,
in a good democratic system, when you're the victor, then you have to show grace, humility, you recognize your opponent, and then there's always, specifically for Americans, there's always that American call that he says that now that the election is done, let us all unite and build America together again and move on.
But yes. Looking at Kenya, 5 years on, we still haven't moved on. You still hear people, and we still drive that story.
Yes.
Elections were stolen. I mean, it's not going to change right now for them to, anybody who feels that it was stolen. But do we carry on? Yes, Eric.
You know, after the 2013 general election, there was a lot of talk, and especially in the media, and I was in the newsroom, and you know, every other story kept saying, how to heal the nation, how to, it's a divided country. And my argument always was, it's an election. There's going to be a winner and a winning side and a loser and a losing side. And when you have a threshold of 50% plus one vote, it means even the Constitution itself foresees an instance where almost half the country does not elect the victor. We cannot start saying that it's a divided country. It's obvious. It's the nature of democracy. The majority wins. Majority can be by one person. So it's not really the job of the victor alone to come out and say, let's unite, to reach out to the loser and say, let's unite. It's also the obligation of the loser to accept that they have lost and to reach out to the winner and say, you have won, well won, let's unite. Or you have won, I'm contesting, but let's unite. Either way, uniting is a must.
It's a must.
It shouldn't
and
be
it's for the best of the country anyway, for us to unite.
It shouldn't be a conversation.
It's also good to note that in the U.S. history, the issue of contesting a presidential election only happens at state level, and the last one that happened was in 2000, the issue of Florida, but rarely do we find that there's a presidential petition filed at the Supreme Court because they concede.
They concede. All right. Immediately.
Michael, let me just weigh in before we move on.
Very briefly.
One thing, Kenya is yet to mature politically, and I think, like I said before, we have a lot of lessons to draw from the U.S. For instance, when you saw immediately Barack Obama, the outgoing president, realized that Trump had run away with the victory, he actually placed a call, and the following day, despite all the things that Obama had talked about Donald Trump, he invited him to White House, and they had a conversation. The talk was quite cordial, even the body language. That is what we need in the country. But moving on swiftly, I think right now the eyes will be focused on the kind of cabinet that Donald Trump is putting in place. For instance, right now we have a lot of accusations, a lot of condemnation on his choice of chief strategist, Mr. Bannon. Number two, there is his chief of staff, Previous. Now, you see, this early, if we are talking of contestations about his cabinet, I think it is an opportunity for him to go back and actually relook at the people that he wants to put on his cabinet.
Or maybe not. He's being bullied by the same people who are trying to bully him out of the
Should
election.
he inherit some of the cabinets for the outgoing president? I think those are things that he might want to consider as the
Well, it
the
remains
Americans
to be seen what decisions he's going to make on that. But I want us to move on now to something else. And let's come back home and look at our election. Come August 8th, 2017, we go to the polls. And graft has been something we have talked about for a long time. Ohito, do you think graft is going to ever move from an election agenda? That's one of the promises that Jubilee put in place and said we're going to deal with graft. And the more they have dealt with it, the more they have not dealt with it.
Of course, it's top of the agenda and it's very intertwined with our ethnic lenses, you know. Kenyan elections have always been around, you know, what ethnic super alliance or coalition or tuko pamoja is it, you know, that kind of approach. And that is also part of corruption because we do not want credible Kenyans with who merit positions to rise to these levels. And there's no doubt it's going to be big. When you hear a State House summit discussing corruption, and you hear none other than head of state saying, what do you expect me to do? Then it tells you there's a bigger problem. But we should all unite, support the presidency, support the critical institutions, and help fight this vice that has ruined our country. If the money that we lose to corruption, which is about a third of our 1 trillion budget, can go into the right jobs, then we'd have perfect roads, we'd have functional hospitals, and like Magufuli did, take our wives to Kenyatta National Hospital and not to diaspora for treatment.
Head to South Africa to remove aldosterone.
Sure.
William Okech, the graft and the fact that it just seems to be a dragon that you cut one head, if at all it is being cut and another one pops up.
Oh yes, graft is going to be a big issue in the next campaign. Specifically because the government has painted this picture of being unable to adequately stand up to its campaign promise. It has been kind of bad-footed. There's the issue of EACC. EACC has been, I would say, maybe interfered with because it has never had a full office for a very long time. There's been the issue of immediately after the president made the State of the Nation address and spanned out the list of shame, it did appear that there were some certain elements within EACC who were very keen to direct the manner and the conduct of those investigations. Only yesterday we saw that the EACC CEO, Halake Wako, said that they have recommended that about 8 governors to be prosecuted. But then again, this persistent information that you recommend, I think Kenyans have gotten tired of that. We need to see people prosecuted because it is all obvious. There is graft, national level, county government, there is graft. So I think both the county governments, the national government, they should really, really be serious because graft is going to be an issue. A lot of money has been wasted. We saw the NYS because it was quite shaming, you know, and very humiliating to be Kenyan when you see a deputy president of the country lamenting about graft, you know, pointing figures to a fellow former cabinet member on issues graft, then it shows you that the government is losing script on the war against corruption.
All right.
Let me say this, Michael.
Yeah.
The war on graft is not a government affair only. It is every Kenyan's agenda. Number two, the truth of the matter is corruption will inform the next year's elections. Not only corruption, but quite a number of issues. But let's talk about corruption. When the president spoke from State House and said, what exactly do you want me to do in order for us to fight corruption or eradicate corruption? I think that was a fundamental question that Kenyans needed to answer. It should have pricked their conscience and woken them up. Now, why do I say so? The truth of the matter is the president spoke from his heart. What have we done ever since? Have we been able to answer that fundamental question, even the media? Look at EACC. I think the biggest problem with EACC is the infighting between the Secretariat and the Commission itself, the chairperson and his commissioners. The day we address that anomaly, maybe it is the day we'll start now realizing the gains of fighting corruption, because that effort has been there all along for 4 years. But it is very difficult for us to acknowledge the fact that we haven't made progress in the fight against corruption.
All right, Eric,
what progress is there? There's really no progress to say. Before the president said, what do you want me to do? He had said that his own office has been invaded by corruption cartels. We didn't see a person leave his office.
And he's promised and declared
constitutionally, can he do anything? Can he do anything?
And heads did not roll. If he cannot do anything, Crispus, then what
Kenyans enacted,
the normal
He needs to tell us whether those cartels are still within.
The day Kenyans enacted a new constitution and established independent bodies to deal with particular issues, that is the day
and
Kenyans
I think that's why we need to draw the line and declare what is it that this constitution has done to disempower the executive to a point where he cannot do anything. Eric, Kenyans, are we just hypocritical given that I remember the clip that everybody used to laugh about of this lady who was talking about Serikali's idea in Budalangi because it kept flooding. But now when it comes to corruption, are we sitting back and expecting the government to do something, whereas possibly we're just hypocritical as Kenyans, and maybe the media needs to take that up and prick our conscience ourselves?
I'll answer that question. I've answered this question before, and I'll answer it again. And I'll tell Crispus, the day corruption will be fought in Kenya is not the day that we will sort out the EACC Commission versus Secretariat. It is the day Kenyans decide enough is enough with corruption.
I said among other things.
Give him time to finish.
Top on my list is not EACC infighting. Top on my list is the people of Kenya deciding that they want to fight corruption. Because on that day, there will be an executive head of state, like we have now, who will come out and start fighting corruption, and there will be support. And he'll not fear or political repercussions. The president was saying the other day, I kicked out people, and I have gotten a lot of slack politically. I am going into an election with baggage of what I did, and I was doing it trying to fight corruption. What he's saying is, I cannot do that again, right? I will not do that again. Until those people who have gone to court, there are always injunctions in court, and those people have support. They have support bases. They coalesce around and they come, and our tribe, all the Kambas went to court in support of Charity Ngilu, other people went to court in support of Churchill and others. The day Kenyans decide that if you're caught, you're caught. If you have a case in court, if there's clear evidence that something happened under your watch, you cannot come and vie to be governor and we expect that you have even the slightest
and allow me to interrupt you, Eric, because at some point Kenyans were there. Do you remember a time, I think during the infamous Mishoke rules, where a policeman would be caught bribing and literally would be frog-marched by Kenyans?
It was immediately after the 2002 elections, right? When there was this high hopes of a new system coming in, and that's what we need. But Kenyans, it'll have to come from the bottom. It has to be Kenyans deciding that we shall not. Enough. And I'll give you an example that I gave Gadara, and just allow me 2 minutes to give you this example. In a village, in your village at home, you have siblings, you have cousins, you have neighbors. If you have one sibling who is a rotten apple, let's call it that way, who is a drunkard who comes and steals chicken and goes and sells chicken, and you just come back home and you realize chicken gone, and the guy is drunk, and we know who it is, and it's your brother. If you have a function at home on a particular day, always somebody is assigned. Can you make sure that you know where Ohito is? Because we have guests who are coming. We do not want our guests to lose something. We have to make sure that we don't do that.
Michael, it is very interesting.
That is what happens at home. That's what happens at home. We have decided. But then, assume the same Ohito, he was not stealing and going to drink, but Ohito goes to Nairobi. Ohito was nobody 2 months ago. Ohito comes back from Nairobi driving a car. The next thing that homestead and the village is going to do is going to make Ohito the guest of honor in the next church fundraising. Not questioning where did Ohito
get his funds from?
Ohito 2 months ago had nothing. Ohito has come back.
Just a quick one, Michael. Okay.
Before you make your quick one,
Yes.
Ian Kim, I think the focus also has been too much on the national government. Let us focus on counties. And I'll give my home county, Siaya, a county that never saw 300 million shillings in one go in 1 year, now gets 5.5 billion every single year. Over the last 4 years, over 20 billion shillings. But where is this money? We are being told roads. That is the big question that we must start interrogating at the grassroots level. There's as much graft, if not worse, in our counties than in the national government. And two, we must also pay a lot of attention to the CDFs, these loudmouth members of National Assembly who get kitties. We must hold them accountable. If you come from Ugenya constituency, you must ask your MP, what has the money allocated to CDF done? Can you show us public audit records and how you spend the money? That is the only way we'll hold leaders to account. But to make noise at the national leaders, forgetting the ones we elected are living with us at grassroots, I think we'll be missing
We're going round in circles. And I want us to change now to something
Michael,
else.
before we change.
I'll give you a chance.
Okay,
I know
okay.
you'll still bring it in somehow. But this is to do with our leaders and the fact that we need to hold them accountable. And let's take an example of Martha Karua, basically blowing hot and cold or changing just overnight. And I don't know what the electorate thinks about that, but maybe just to refresh our memories on what she had to say right here on Morning Express, and then later she changed tune. Let's hear what she had to say. Sound.
Like, if you ask me, I think it's time Uhuru and Ruto hanged their boots. My people know where they want to cast their vote, and I'm telling them, yes, it is okay to vote me governor in Kenya and to support the president in Jubilee.
All right, and well, we missed the first part of that particular soundbite, but we got at least an important part. It's okay, I think we'll skip it, but we got the important part where she says that I think it's time Uhuru and Ruto hang their boots one day. The next day, my people have told me where to start.
What's wrong? What's wrong with what she said?
The fact that this is a leader.
I was just about to ask you the same question.
Yeah, let
Here's
me
the
see
thing. Here's a soundbite. Let's go back to what she says. I think it's time Uhuru and Ruto hang their boots. The second one, she says, Kenya is not going to have a presidential candidate in this election. Yes, Kenya will allow branches to choose who they want to support. My people, which means her branch of Kirinyaga, my people know who they want to vote for. And they have come and told her, us guys, we are supporting Uhuru. So she's like, I hear you. Every time, even Ohito will come and tell us one day that he has heard the voice of the people.
Michael, but my question here is in regards to the values.
No, Michael.
What drives the decision that you have made? Is it just the people?
Michael, when you
aren't
asked,
you meant to be a leader?
You asked, and we are asking you, what is wrong with that statement?
And I've answered and said...
Number two, is Martha Karua the first person to change her
Does
political
that make it
tune?
Right because she's not
Anyang'
the first person
Nyong'o
to
did,
change?
James Orengo
Does it
did,
make it
a lot
right?
of politicians have done it. The truth of the matter is, Michael, this country must realize that politics is local. It is the art of the possible. If Martha Karua has realized that her Kirinyaga constituency, in order for them to vote for her, she must toe the line and not go against the grain the way she did in 2013, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Okay. It is better for her to join the team, achieve her ambition, because actually she's approaching 60-something, right? Mm-hmm. So why stay in the political cold when you can join them and defend your values from within? There is nothing wrong with that.
William?
Yes, on principle, I don't think what not only Martha Karua did, but also Peter Kenneth did is right. Because these are individuals who have consistently cut out this image of being nationalists, of being above petty tribal politics. You know, Peter Kenneth actually came out, he was targeting a youth vote initially and say that let us build Kenya for all, giving out this impression of being a cosmopolitan. The same with Martha Karua, who not only said that it's high time for the government, this current government, to be voted out, but also gave clear, straight indications that she will be part of an opposition coalition. Now, for you again to change tune and say that now that I'm going to vie for this seat, I think I'm going to support these incumbents to win, I think it is pure political selfishness for those individuals to say that.
Okay.
Yeah?
Ohito, is it just politics? And we as the electorate are supposed to question and think, if you say one thing today and you change tomorrow, how do I trust you?
You see, what happens is that if you, sometimes for you to effect change, you need to be inside. And
in the system.
Yes, and there have been very many examples. For KANU to have been brought down, you needed Raila Odinga to leave NDP, walk in there and wreck it from inside and walk out. And that was the end of KANU. I think let's give Martha Karua a chance. Let's not rubbish her. Let her walk in there and let's see what she can do. Can she fight the dragon of corruption from within? Can she tell them now you hang boots from within? I think for me, I'll give her the benefit of doubt. She's one of the best, of the fairest political leaders we've ever had in this country, not tainted as much by graft.
At the same time, Martha Karua has not declared support for Uhuru Kenyatta. She has said, the people, you want to vote for Uhuru, you vote for Uhuru. Vote for me as governor. Who knows, Martha Karua might vote for somebody else, herself, as president.
As president, all right. We'll have to wind it up right there.
And when it comes as her being a governor, she may not be a governor who supports the Jubilee. In fact, she is not joining Jubilee. She says it's not Kenya.
She's still not Kenya. All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Eric Latif, who's a journalist, William Okech, policy analyst, Chris Pasiankem, communication expert, and David Ohito, who's a digital editor here with the Standard. That's the newsroom. We'll wind it up right there, but do stay with us right here on Morning Express.